Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day. I'm Joe Doolittle, and this is Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience. I'm Kate Dudding.
And did I say I was Joe Doolittle?
You did.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just checking on that because lately it's been a wonder that I've been able to keep up with almost anything. I just love the way spring just kind of bursts like that.
Well, it kind of burst, and then we had summer, and then we're back to spring.
Yep.
But we've got enough moisture. We're back up to our normal precipitation. Yeah. Though when you get 2 inches of it in 2 days, I'm not sure it really is as effective as it might be.
There's no doubt about it, but the grass is green on both sides of the fences around here. We're going to spend the better part of an hour with you, and we're glad you're here. And our purpose is to kind of showcase the art of story and storytelling. We've got a wonderful guest storyteller for you, and we like to share what's going on in storytelling, particularly over the summer, because there's a number of good opportunities out there. But Kate, what's the most interesting thing you've been doing in storytelling lately?
I've started working on a new story. It's about different ways of giving.
Different ways of giving.
That there was a little girl, a 9-year-old in Clifton Park in the year 2000, Katie, H-O-C-H, I think it's Hawk, thank you. Katie Hawk, who was dying of cancer. And she'd had great pleasure in listening to her mother read aloud the Harry Potter books. And they were coming to the end of the 3rd book, and the 4th book hadn't been published yet. And her mother felt that Katie wasn't going to be alive by the time it was published. So her mother wrote to the publisher and explained the situation. And a few weeks later, they got an email from Joe Rowling.
Oh, really?
Really. And they started up a correspondence. It wasn't just, and her mother has recently published a book. And her mother said, you know, I hadn't expected really to get a response. And if I did, maybe 1 or 2 emails. You know, this is a woman who was busy, but no, it became a true correspondence.
Wow.
And Joe shared the plot of coming up, and then when Katie was really fading, Katie's mom wrote an email to Joe, told her that, and Joe wrote back and said, "Could I call? Aww. Could you tell me a time that would be convenient, because I'd like to call and read Katie."
Oh man.
Yeah.
And just telling about the story makes it a pretty good story.
Yeah. So the book has been published.
And the book's name is?
The mother's book.
Her mother's book about Katie. And there's bits about this. And then I searched the internet and found other articles that had been published shortly after Katie's death about this. Oh. And so I have I have the emails back and forth.
Wow.
And Joe wrote this wonderful sympathy note. And she said, she ended it by saying that Katie has left footprints on my heart.
Oh.
And then when she found out that Katie's parents had started a foundation, and the purpose of which is to fund research, but also to give treats, make every day count. That was that's what Katie did. When she found out she needed another operation, she said, "Great, And she said, because when I wake up from the operation, Daddy will be there.
Wow.
She and her mother spent about 18 months at Sloan Kettering in New York City, coming home about only every 6 weeks or so. So she looked for the upside. So anyways, they started a foundation, and when Joe Rowling heard about it, that she was not solicited for funds, she sent a check for $100,000.
Whoa!
And okay, and Joe Rowling has fallen off the billionaires list in England because she has given away. It is felt she doesn't publicize this. She publicizes what organizations she supports, but not how she supports. It's estimated she has given away $160 million.
Wow.
So.
Well, Harry Potter would be proud of her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And probably that little girl, too.
Yes, I'm sure. So you asked, and suddenly it all just kind of
Now,
burbled out.
if I had asked the question about what's your story this week, Kate, I might have gotten the same answer. I don't know. And one of the things that I've come to understand is that the stories of ourselves, our lives, and those we love are right there with us all the time. And sometimes it's a real privilege and a real opportunity for learning to just ask the question, so tell me a story, or what's the most interesting thing about today? And that was a great response. And you've given us really good responses to that question over the years on this show, but that one is probably right up there among the top two. And we'll look forward to the complete story sometime, and we'll bring Kleenex. No, I didn't mean that.
I thought you were going to say Joe Rowling. I'm going, I don't know.
I don't think we can get Joe Rowling on the show.
No, but it was only made public because Katie's mom wanted to bring the attention of the foundation to the public to raise more money. So Joe Rowling never, she agreed to have it been made public, but it was not at it's not her idea to make it public.
Well, there's no way I can top that one, I'll tell you. But stories are alive and well in our town, and we'll come back to that. And I can only give you a seed of a story that I've got working on, and it's going to be on George Hutchins. And George Hutchins was a master organist. Actually, he was a master organ maker. And I've discovered this only by the coincidence, which is the way a lot of stories come together, of meeting the grandson-in-law of a good friend who happens to be a multi-talented musician, and among other things, is an organist. So I'll just file that one away. It won't be as wonderful or as evocative, I think, as the story of Katie, but we're all working on a story.
Yeah. And we're always trolling for
That's
stories.
right. That's right. You always listen for stories. And if they're in the sound of an organ, that's pretty good. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Kate.
Indeed.
And I've had the occasion to tell stories with and to spend time with Janet Carter from Saugerties, who's a very wonderful, deep, intelligent, talented storyteller with a background in a number of academic disciplines and the fine arts, I think. Do we want to say anything more about her before we introduce her?
And her roots are down south.
Her roots are down south?
south.
I did not know
Yes,
that.
yes.
Down south, like are we talking the Carolinas?
I believe we are.
We're talking the Carolinas. Well, without further ado, let us introduce you to this Tar Heel who's all the way up here in the Hudson Valley now. Janet Carter, welcome.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Kate, for all you do for storytellers. And I would hesitate to say all the things you do for storytellers, but I'm glad to be here. I was a Tar Heel by adoption only. I went to drama school at Chapel Hill, which is a good thing to do.
University of North Carolina.
Yeah. But my mother was from Tennessee, and I draw on that.
I see.
Kind of hear her voice sometimes.
Well,
But thank you for having me.
Well, we're pleased to have you here, and I know that you've spent most of your life before Socrates in New York City. So,
Yeah.
so when you say where you're from, where are you from?
Ah, what a good question. In Socrates, I'm still new, right? I've been there 15 years. I'm very fond of it. I started a storytelling venue that you both have helped me with, and so Socrates is home. Hudson Valley is home, and some of my stories are drawn from there.
Good. It is a very wonderful little town, and the Inspiring Minds bookstore and that venue of yours
Thank you.
is really a wonderful venue. So if you're at all catching this and you're on the southern part of the service area, think about stopping in and trying out a number of the great restaurants there and the Inquiring Minds bookstore.
And it's the last
Wednesday of every month. We've been doing it. We're heading into our 4th year now. We've had benefited enormously from having storytellers from the Capital District come down. And also the local television channel 23, John Drews III. And he comes and he coaches me, he says to me. But also the wonderful staff there is very patient and good. And one time there was a knitting club meeting at the same time, and the volume was rather, and I said to myself, don't complain, don't get tense. I went back to the coffee bar, and a hard-working young woman said, they even went over the musicians. But we've had adventures there, and we've had lots of good storytelling.
We've had some good times there. Thank you for pulling that together.
And you can see on the slide that the next 3, well, this is our July show, which we tape in June. So there's 2 events that are of interest on July 31st. Ron?
Silveka. He tells classic stories. He comes from New York City, and he came to me via Mary Summerlin.
Okay. And then on August 28th, our very own Marnie Gillard will be
Marnie's
there
down.
telling our truths.
Ooh.
7 o'clock, Inquiring Mind Bookstore.
Thank
Very
you.
easy to find off the
Main and Petition
New York State Thruway.
for some of us.
Yes.
Janet, you studied drama.
Yeah.
And you spent time in New York. And did you have a run in the theater as well?
Yeah, I toured with Menashe Skulnick, and I was in regional theater, and then I stopped. I just stopped. And I went to graduate school, and I became a college professor, and I worked for a foundation. May I tell you how I got to storytelling?
Please.
Well, we're leading up to that. We were leading up to that.
Yes,
I was just going to segue from maybe the theater, but graduate school will do.
Whatever, however.
Whatever. Well, we've all had several lifetimes, right? So, but somehow I was in New York City. I was a New Yorker. I was divorced. And I found myself, you do things in these circumstances. I found myself on a bus with a lot of strangers going to a place I had never heard of, Jonesboro, Tennessee.
Really?
And I saw Ray Hicks, and I wandered through those tents. I didn't know from storytelling. And on the way back, this group of strangers who were no longer strangers ended up in an inexpensive motel, the way you do, and in somebody's room. And a story came out of my mouth. It just came out of my, and that was the birth of it all. May I tell you that story?
Well, just please do, but just for the listeners who don't know, Jonesboro, Tennessee is the Delphi, is the oracle spot for storytelling in the United States. It's where the National Storytelling Festival is held annually, and it draws 12,000 folks to this small little college town in eastern Tennessee. And it is magical for anybody who's been there because stories, there are 5 circus tents filled with storytellers that go 12, 15 hours a day. It's just great.
And they hold the audience. They just hold them. I mean, it's just marvelous. Just marvelous.
With that little bit of interruption, we'd love to hear the story.
Thank you for that editing. Yeah, there I was in this motel room, right? And it was me, but I called her Marnie since I was a beginner. I said, Marnie stood in that moment between fear and exultation. She was going to iron her first shirt. She could feel the box beneath her feet that Bea had put there for her to stand on. She could see the shirts all properly sprinkled and rolled. Dr. Carter's shirts take no starch. She had heard it 100 times. It was as if the kitchen was observing her. There was the sink over in the corner, the stove over there where Bea fried the chicken in that big, heavy iron frying pan, and the counters opposite her with the sun reflected off of them. She knew she could do it. She knew she could do it. She took a breath and flipped the shirt onto the ironing board. First, you do the placket. And she was ironing, and the iron felt strangely heavy in her hand. And you put that nose, and she knew Bea wouldn't say, "Don't burn yourself." We understood each other. "You're doing it wrong." That boy. She hadn't even known he was in the room. She'd forgotten about him. She was, "Alonzo, don't you talk about what you don't know." Lonnie had gotten it good. Bea had told him. Bea had told him proper. But Marnie didn't want to iron anymore. She got down off the box, went through the pantry where the ice box was, and you could see the man bringing the ice on his shoulder once a week, and then she knew where Bea kept the grocery money under the newspaper in a drawer, and then out through the swinging door into the dining room. She'd tell Daddy about the ironing. Yeah, no, not Daddy. Maybe Mommy. If Mommy was home from the office, she'd tell her. Years passed. Marnie had children of her own. She sat in a very different kitchen with the dishwasher and the stove all in docile alignment with her mother in the exquisite reprieve of a toddler's nap time. They talked, moving back and forth more for the pleasure of each other's company than for anything that was said. And then, honey, honey, I didn't tell you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for Bea. It seems there was a fight, and Lonnie knifed up his German wife pretty badly. He's in the stockade for a long time. Marnie looked down in her coffee cup. She could see the skin forming on the top. "Oh, Lonnie," she thought. "Oh, Lonnie. It wasn't that German woman who took your mother away from you. It was me."
And that's how you jumped into storytelling.
That's how you jumped.
And you know something? My daughter doesn't like that story at all. You know how your kids sometimes are, she said, "Mom, you're blaming yourself for its social reality."
Families are often our harshest critics. That I know many storytellers who
have that reaction.
Have that.
Did you know it was an African American woman I was talking about?
No.
No.
See, that's revealing. Mm-hmm. Because I, as a kid, didn't think of her as one thing or the other. Mm-hmm. So I think as a story, that's maybe interesting. A storyteller has to remember all the pieces that the audience may need to know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought she might be, and then I kind of thought it didn't matter, you know, because it was clear that she was a domestic, and it was clear that Lonnie was probably her son.
Right.
But I didn't.
It
I
didn't register that one. Right.
You know, in a way, it wasn't material to the story the way you told it. Well, can you remember what the reaction was of the folks on the bus?
Sitting there?
Yeah.
Wow, what a good question. There was that lovely woman who has since died, who created the Connecticut Storytelling Festival.
Yeah. Oh, in Celebration. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
We know.
no.
In any event, she and I corresponded for a while. She was a little embarrassed because I was in the foundation world and she was trying to find out about and foundations kind of stuff. The people were great. The people were great. Then I went back to New York and I didn't do storytelling.
Oh,
I
really?
mean, I kind of put out feelers, but I wasn't. No, I really didn't.
Oh, really?
Until I got up here and met Janine Lafferty.
Ah, another Janine
And I
student.
became her student.
Oh. Well, that's great. That's great that you discovered the art that you had inside when you did, because it's blossomed very nicely. Thank you. That's yeah.
Now, I hate to rush us into the coming attractions, but I know you have a much longer story to tell. So let's get the business out of the way,
Thank
and
you,
then we'll
Kate.
come back.
Thank you, Kate.
So we've mentioned the storytelling for inquiring minds. I'll be doing a program on Monday, July 8th up at Weowaka, which is just outside of Lake George Village. It was started as a respite house for women working in factories in Troy. So it's over 100 years old, and they have programs in the summer. I'll be telling at 4 o'clock, Julia Child, Cook and Nifty Wench, a number of stories about her. And I
Cook
think
and Nifty Wench.
Wench.
Nifty Wench comes from one of the poems that her husband wrote to her.
Nifty Wench.
Nifty Wench.
Nifty Wench. Man, that's a.
That's a killer.
I wish I'd thought about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, I wish I'd met that Nifty Wench. I mean,
Yes,
there you go. Okay.
yes, I think hopefully after you hear the stories, you will feel that way also.
Well, and Weowaka, you'll have a story about being at Weowaka too, won't you, when you come home?
Right, and dinner that night will be inspired by her recipes. I don't have the exact menu, but maybe I should call and find that out.
No, Weowaka, for those of us.
No N, Weowaka.
Weowaka.
Be a walk.
It's an interesting story because it's a retreat center for women that was funded by either the Cluets or the Prines, or both families,
And the Tresks.
and the Tresks, for working women to have a place to go in the summer to retreat for vacation. And it's continued in that purpose with a little broader interpretation for what working women are, but it's just a great tradition, I think, in a beautiful place. So.
Yes, indeed. And then, if any of you are interested in becoming a storyteller, there's an annual storytelling weekend up at Pyramid Lake Life Center with Kevin Brooks, Marnie Gillard, who we mentioned, and Laura Packer.
Good.
And you can find out more information at the website listed here, or write to Marnie at marniegillard.com.
And that's a beautiful place too, nestled among the mountains near the Pyramid Lake Wilderness area, and you have access to the opportunities of the camp in terms of things. So it's a great opportunity to get away.
And then the long-running, not just for kids storytelling series, starts on July 28th. There are 6 Sunday nights, not including the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. And the admission is free. There are free refreshments, rain or shine. And the first teller will be the fabulous Beth Horner, coming to us from the Midwest, Illinois or Indiana, one of those I states, not Iowa. She's won the Circle of Excellence Award from the National Storytelling Network. So that's the good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, in the storytelling world. And then going on for Sandy Schumann, who we've had on the show, Baba Jamal Karam, who was at one of the Riverway Storytelling Festivals, Nora Dooley, the same thing, she's from the Boston area, Karen Pillsworth, who's been on our show, the Storyteller Laureate from Kingston. And then I will be ending up the series on the Sunday after Labor Day weekend, Women Who Made a Difference, True Stories About American Women. I might slip a Julia Child story in there. So, and if you want to find out more about us, we're over 90 stories now on our website. Go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on YouTube. And Janet's stories will be there probably by the time you see this, if everything falls into place. So.
And the two other things that we don't have slides on, but
Yet.
the week of the second week in July, Native Americans are celebrating what they call the two-row wampum belt with a two-row paddle. And as legend has it, the first contact between the Dutch and Native peoples, in this case the Iroquois in the Hudson River, the natives presented a wampum belt with two rows of beads and dark beads in a white belt. And it was intended to signify two rivers in parallel, moving together through life. And it was that intent that the native people greeted the Dutch. And it was in 1613 with Captain Blocks of Block Island fame was the skipper, right off the mouth of the Normanskill. So the Iroquois and a group of Native Americans, about 40 strong, are going to be paddling from Syracuse all the way to New York to commemorate this event and to draw some attention to some of the issues still remaining about Native American rights. But they will be at the Mabee Farm on Saturday, the 13th of July, for a festival and a powwow, a sacred fire. There'll be storytelling, there'll be musicians, and there'll be food to eat. So come out and get involved with that and see that wonderful place. There'll also be a potluck supper at Lock 7 as they make their way east. On the following weekend, the 21st, I'm Telling Stories is part of the Schuylerville History Days at the mansion of General Schuyler in Schuylerville. There'll be all sorts of wonderful colonial arts, crafts, and performances there, starting about 12 o'clock noon through the afternoon. So great opportunity to get out and play, and also to see oxen and things like that. There we go. Well, we're kind of ready for another story. I
think we are.
Think we are? Now we're ready. The question is whether Janet's ready. Janet, are you ready to share a story?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this story links back to yourself.
Oh.
Joe came down to Inquiring Minds several times, and among other things that I consulted with him, you'll learn you have to ask Joe a lot of things, and Kate too, was how do you get people to respond to an open mic? Well, he gave us a number of ideas and we used them successfully, but then one time he said, think of a place, is there one place in Saugerties you'd really like to tell about? And I knew immediately which mine would be. You see, it's down near where I live. It's down near my house. Oh, you go down and it's a little incline and the maples are above you and you can hear the Esopus Creek. It's really, I think of it as a little river, but they call it a creek. And it's coming over the stones so you can hear it. And I love it in the early morning or late afternoon because the sun is this golden beam through the trees. But I'm a city person and I tend to people a place. Well, if you know where to look, there's something there to help you. Because what's down among the rich black dirt and the maple trees that have fallen the previous season is slag. It's from the mill. Because where I'm standing, is the original mills, the Ulster iron mill, created in 1827. And this was spit off from it all those years ago. Well, the mill, you see, was the product of the creation of one Henry Barclay. I like to think of him standing there on the edge of the river looking up. He was a smart man, and he had a few advantages. His father was the British consul in New York, and he had been there recently in a partnership with his brother. And now he looked up. Oh, well, it was a wilderness. There were not in Saugerties 10 houses at that time. But he saw that incline I had walked down, it promised power, you see. Oh, he knew of the Erie Canal and the expansion of industry into the continent. And if you could run water down an incline, you could get power. And that meant something. So Henry, he also had the advantage of money. He paid $7,000 for one piece of land on one side of the Esopus, near where I live, and $28,000. Do you have any idea what that means in today's money? Close to $1 million. And he built his mill. So the water, and he built a dam. And so the water came through a crevice down, powering what was to be this extraordinarily successful iron mill. Now, what else did he need? Oh, he built it just 3 stories, and then when he got some extra time, he built a paper mill over to the right. He planned also workers' housing. You can see the plot even now. They were very small, 2 houses, a row of houses together, and gardens out in the front, and then bigger houses for the management in the rear. But he needed people. It's suspected that he went down to Brooklyn and recruited Irish workers. Now, this was not quite yet the Irish famine time, not the time of disaster when there were millions coming in, but there were plenty of Irish trying to get to New York. You know, the British charged £5 to get to New York and only 15 shillings to get to Canada. Some of the Irish are reputed to have come in and walked down, but in any event, there they were. And the mill, using that power from the dam, first the iron would come in what they call pigs, sent in up from the Hudson. And you had to get the dross out of it, the bad stuff out of it. So they reduced it to liquid. Now these are men are standing stripped to the waist, right? And the mill is running night and day. And then once you get it liquefied, those are the peddlers who did that. And then you get to the slingers, and the slingers were the guys who operated a 7-ton hammer. Yeah, 7 tons. Dropping it so that every impurity was pressed out of that iron. Wow. He was important, Mr. Barclay. Mr. Barclay believed in churches and a proper life. He built the Presbyterian, the Episcopalian church, and there's a plaque there to this day honoring him. But he built St. Mary's of the Snow Catholic Church. And he proceeded to deduct 50 cents a week from the pay of all those men in the mill who should be going to church. As far as we know, no one objected. Well, when you think about it, what was life like for them? We have an idea of what happened to the men, but the kids, did they go to school? What was it? Since 1814, school had been mandatory in New York State. And there were 3 districts in Saugerties at that time. You have to prod a little to find out that while money came from the state and from the locality, if there was something left over, the parents had to make it up. So we're not quite sure whether those mill kids were able to go. Now school, some of you may know, school was sort of a tough thing in the 19th century. The benches had no backs to them, for example. And you learned everything by memory. You were there for 8 hours. In Saugerties, the girls went in the winter and the boys went in the summer. Just why that was, I'm not sure. But now, when I walk down that incline, you know what? I think of the Irish, and I think of what had happened to them all, even before they came. You see, I was in Derry. If you know anyone in Northern Ireland, you don't call it Londonderry. And I was stopped dead in my tracks by a street statuary. You know, you see them, for example, there's one on 6th Avenue in Manhattan where there's a man hunched over, and you suddenly think, what is he doing in the middle of the sidewalk? And you realize that he's a statue. He's there to remind you of what the garment district was like. This one, the one I saw, it wasn't a single figure. It was a group. There was a man, he had a little boy by the hand, and he's faced dead ahead. He's going down to the harbor. Next to him, there's a woman in 19th century dress. She's holding a baby, but she's looking back. And back there, a bent-aged couple and a teenage girl. And she's leaving her firstborn to take care of the old folks. And she knows she'll never see her again. And your family, those who came so long ago, do we have any idea? Do we have any idea of the reserve, the resolution it took, the courage? When I walk down now, and I think of those, particularly the Irish women, you know what? I think they have a few pithy things to say about Henry. Oh, never uptown, of course. Maybe just here at home.
Wow. Janet, thank you for the tour of Saugerties in a way, but you actually took us so many other places. That was quite a remarkable tale.
Thank you.
And
I forgot one thing, Joe. You always forget one thing. When they listed the churches 20 years later in an official document, they didn't mention St. Mary's.
Oh, really?
No. And it's there to this day.
Did he give the money to the church that he deducted?
As far as we know, St. Mary's doesn't release this when you ask them for their official. There's nothing about Henry there. But local historians have told me very firmly that he gave the money for the church because he thought keep people. It was proper. No, I won't besmudge his motives. He thought that was a proper thing. Yeah. People should have a church. So he built one.
Wow.
And he built it, and then his men
supported
it. Yeah. I mean, they weren't paying him back. No, they were.
I was
making it a going concern, continuing it.
I was hearing the echo of another time, though, because I go to this big old church in First Reformed in Schenectady, and interestingly, that GE employees could have contributions to not-for-profits matched, although they don't match contributions to churches, because that's the employee's responsibility. On the other hand, they do get matches for the inner city ministry and some other more, I suppose, not congregational kinds of giving. So it is interesting that they would kind of make the move to create the congregations, if you will, or create the churches, since they
Well, there were no strikes while Henry was there.
I
There
can
was no
imagine.
union.
And no union.
Yeah. No, and you set the time frame. You know, the 1820 and the 6 or 10 houses and buying the land. You know, you sketched so much that let us play with those facts, which is a good way of sharing a little method, because you don't have to tell the whole story. You just have to tell enough that people can knit things together on their own, and that's kind of what I did.
You tell a lot of history stories, don't you?
I do
like them.
tell a lot of history stories. They kind of have been ingrained in me over the years, so they aren't work for me, but thank you. And that didn't seem to be like work for you either.
No. I like to think of those women.
Yeah.
They were survivors.
Oh, one of my grandmothers was of Irish stock, though it was her, Dennis was her father. It was her grandparents who would come over, so she was at least a second generation, born in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
That apparently her grandparents came over around the time of the Great Hunger.
The Great Hunger.
That all their children were born in Connecticut. So
And that was
in the
very
early
important.
1850s.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's when they came over. But my grandmother, Mary Catherine Kiley was her given name, and Monday was baking day, you know, and Tuesday was, you know, it was.
Yeah, that's
and-
right.
and-
The days was
Right,
set.
and dinner was on the table at 5:30, and if you weren't there, that was your tough luck. That was not her problem. That was your problem, and everyone. I mean, she had it all set up, and she and my mother were not kindred spirits. But she made wonderful desserts and served them with whipped cream and ice cream.
And ice cream. Oh.
And was upset if you didn't have seconds.
Oh.
This I believe, was a sign of their prosperity.
You may well be right.
That
Wow. It was, to me, this recognition that when you left, you really left.
oh yeah.
My mother-in-law told me that when she was a little girl, and at that time they came home for lunch from public school, and she walked in and she found her mother crying, which was unheard of, absolutely unheard of. And why? There was a letter from Poland, and her mother had died.
Yeah.
I mean, the wrench of well, stories were a way maybe to connect too. You told about the old country.
Yeah.
But boy.
And you know of, I think they were called American wakes.
Yes,
That
I've heard
when,
of that.
especially during the famine, the potato
Yes,
famine,
yeah, people
that when
left.
people were leaving, they held a wake for the people who were going. Of course, they were still there,
Right.
But it was a
You were
farewell
never
party.
gonna
But
see
it
them.
was called a wake because
Yes, that's
they were not going to see each other
like that
again.
woman.
The
Yeah.
couple of reflections. You know, you flattered me a little bit with the question, but it's a question I've used because I think place is important for some context of stories. And you went beyond place. You know, you went beyond place in the context to all the echoes that are there. And so I'm reminded of kind of maybe the power of that kind of question to generate stories if you think about it. And I had the occasion to spend time with a writer friend of mine, Richard Selster. He's a physician who's written, got up in the middle of the night and wrote for years before he went back to bed and then did his surgery. And he's a surgeon in New Haven and on the faculty at Yale. Confessions of a Knife, if you want to read one. And he grew up in Troy. His father was a GP in Troy. He has a wonderful series of stories called Up from Troy. But he was doing a presentation for the New England Archaeological Association, and he went out to a few, went for a walk among the building ruins and the cellar holes in the Connecticut countryside, and sat down and just jotted down things. And his crossover to that issue of place and the stories is that the cellar holes were like the scars on a body.
Oh, wow.
That they told the story of what had happened there.
The house had burned down.
Or something had happened, and you could envision it, you could figure it out. And for you, the charge of the iron slag are kind of those issues of what happened there. And to get slag, you had to get iron ore and coal and all the things that go into it. And you needed Henry or whatever his name was to do
Barclay,
things. So it's a pretty generative issue for you guys who are interested in stories, starting with a very simple question and a very straightforward approach to what is this place. You know, I mean, it's really.
Yeah, but you took from what happened here, you brought us to so many of the people
Oh yeah.
who were there. So you took the place and populated it.
I wish I knew more about the people.
Right. Yeah.
I keep working at it.
But I mean, even just the sketches that you gave us in the processing of the iron and the men stripped to their weight. I mean, melting iron. I'm going. You don't belabor us with the facts of how hot it must have been. But you know, melting iron is you know, it's not like boiling water. Which is pretty hot.
And they
in and
turned
of
out
itself.
about 200 tons a day. I mean, they were really working. Oh. And the paper mill, where the women were allowed to work some, they had great vats of old linen that you melted down in order to make the paper. But in the context, enormous amounts of dust came out. So it went right into their lungs, of course.
Yeah, OSHA, way before OSHA.
Yes.
And they, you know, after a generation, they knew what was happening, but this was how you made your living.
Yes.
I mean, the coal miners, they knew.
They knew.
Before, I'm sure before a
Oh,
name
yeah.
was put, that
was happening.
you got sick and you
Yeah.
died if you worked down in the coal mines.
Yeah.
But how else were they going to put food on the table?
Right.
Yeah.
The other reflection or story from Anne Marie McLaughlin, who I think has been on the show a couple years back, is Irish and lives in Scotia, and tells the story about how her grandparents met. And that same dock in Derry is where the ferry goes across to Glasgow. And her grandfather emigrated to work in Glasgow, but really didn't emigrate. He was just working in Scotland. Of course, he died working in Scotland, but anyway. And he and his buddies would come down to the dock in Glasgow when the ferry came in and check out who was coming off the boat from Donegal. And
The real people.
Well, the real people. They're looking for and one day this attractive young red-haired lady came off from Donegal, and she was a friend of a friend, and the grandfather kind of was introduced to her, which is appropriate in those days. And they walked her to her lodgings from the ferry. And he went back the next day to take her for a walk and show her the town. And they became Anne Marie's grandparents. But I remember the story about the migration and about getting on the ferry boat and leaving Donegal. And the question that generated it was, with her Irish background, why was she always talking about Scotland? And even though she calls herself Irish, she was actually raised in Scotland for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
And she met her husband, who's American, because in the summertime she would go home to Donegal, and her husband was visiting as a teenager with his family in Donegal, and that's how they met. But she would describe herself as being Scotch. So we never cease to amaze me, the international nature of the Irish diaspora.
They do go back and forth.
Yes, and Anne Marie told me once how every time one of their sons had a "Where did you come from?" You know, they traced the family tree, and both trees go back to the same little village in Donegal, and both families are named McLaughlin.
Yeah. Hello.
They go, no.
I'm telling stories. Well, we're in June, and the last Wednesday of June, we're telling Irish stories, and the one that I really is how much, when I was a young woman, the Clancy brothers meant to us. They enrolled us all for the IRA, and I took the music home, and my father said, shot a British Tommy in the back, those people. And I thought, British Tommy, what was he doing in Ireland anyway?
They've been in Ireland for a long time, and but they also brought Aran Island sweaters to us.
See there?
Yes, because and I don't know how they managed to perform, because those are really warm sweaters. I'm a knitter, and so
That's right. They threw their heads back. They were troubadours. They stomped their feet. Oh, they were wonderful.
And the stories behind the sweaters were, in the late 1800s, the Aran Islands, if you've ever been in the west part of Ireland, it's limestone and a little bit of little piles of dirt here and there. And the Aran Islands are just like that. No trees grow on the Aran Islands.
Yes,
so it's very hard to live there. And
it's windy.
It's windy, yes, because they're the barrier islands coming off of the Atlantic Ocean. So a government agency was trying to help communities that didn't have enough land to support them. And Aran Islands didn't have enough land because
there they were.
I mean, it wasn't that they didn't have the acreage; they didn't have the dirt. And so somebody said, "Well, why don't we do a cottage industry?" And they imported yarn from factories in Donegal, in northwestern Ireland, sailed it to the Aran Islands. The women knit them up into sweaters, and then they were sailed around to Dublin, where a woman had country crafts store.
Sure.
And the women, so they were exported for cash.
Yeah.
And they were not worn by the fishermen.
Oh, we always thought they were.
I mean, and there are pictures. There was a film made in the 30s, and there's a picture book, and the fishermen are wearing sweaters, but they're clearly dark, navy or gray or dark gray or black. Would you want fish? How easily do you think getting fish guts out of a creamy white sweater
would not be
so that the story about the patterns on the sweater being the imprint of the place
comes from a play.
Comes from a play.
It comes from a play.
Sneaky.
You're not telling me that's just a story.
No, it is just a story. And in the play, it's by the playwright who wrote Playboy of the Western World, but it's not that play. It's another one. And in the play, a body was found, and it had been in the water much too long, so it could not be recognized. But a sock was recovered, and the mother goes, "Oh, when I was making a sock for
so-and-so,
my beloved son, I dropped a stitch." And so she counts the stitches around.
And it's him?
And it's him. So that's how that story started and flourished. But the women were inspired by their lives. So they have diamonds, and that's like fishing nets, and hoof prints are the double cables, and so forth. I got a little book when I was there, the day trip that I took there, and the author said, "We liked to go to church because then people wore their best sweaters." And I would look and I would study them, and then I would come home and try to duplicate the pattern.
That was what church was good for. Okay.
See, Henry was right.
If
Henry
you're
was
a
right.
knitter, it's
Henry, oh gee.
Yeah.
Well, we have actually explored a number of themes that go way beyond what we thought we were going to be exploring, and
we have about 4 minutes to finish our discussion, and
well,
Thank you all.
well, it's a
really
pleasure.
do
It's a
thank you.
pleasure to have you here, and for those of you who are thinking about taking a little trip, Saugerties, the last Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock in the
Inquiring Mind,
Inquiring Minds bookstore.
Main Street and Petition.
And it's a lovely little setting, and don't, if you go out to dinner or bring your dinner, don't have dessert, because there's a lot of good sweet stuff right there in the bookstore. This
Good
is
coffee.
by the way.
but no beer.
No beer.
But
No
good
beer.
coffee.
Although there is a good brew pub right kind of diagonally across the street,
We
but I've only
found.
been in there twice.
But both times were
Notable.
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 Okay.
And the one kind of reflection maybe we'd offer, we'd like to hear from you. So that if you'd like to have a little bit of feedback on things that you would like us to feature on a future program, please email us at
There's a slide on your screen now
Okey-doke.
with the help of Greg that lists both of our email addresses, the last slide in our series.
I'd say that just because we always are looking for ideas that are going to be meeting your needs, and we have a pretty good imagination, but we do love to hear from you. And also, if you were thinking about developing a hosting event for a storytelling program, if you think that within one of your communities, church, service clubs, that a storytelling program on maybe how to capture your own personal stories or how to do history stories, on the website, storycircle@proctors.org, there's a whole bunch of stories that might feed your interest, and some contact information for over 30 storytellers.
That's the performers button.
Right.
We try to make the website intuitively obvious of how to get around. YouTube is one of the buttons. Performer, story by story, which the web page that talks about this program. Story Sundays, that's our series at the Glenn Sanders Mansion. To be starting its 5th season in September, and I think it'll be our 105th
Story
program.
Sunday?
Yes.
It's our 15th season.
Yeah, our 15th season,
15th
our
season.
105th performance.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful opportunity for kind of group fellowship, both of those events. The one at Proctor's starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Sundays, and usually the Green Market is either in Proctor's Arcade or nearby. There's some lovely restaurants, so it's a great opportunity to go to church. Thank you, Henry.
Of your choice.
Stroll the Green Market, grab lunch either at the Green Market or at one of the restaurants, and come up and listen to stories in the gallery at Proctor's. And then there's punch and cookies and goodies for dessert at intermission, so you get a well-rounded day, and you're home by about 4:30 to read the newspaper.
Or you can, if you want a more formal setting, you can come to the Glenn Sanders Mansion. Those programs start at 5, and our opener will be on October 6th with Marnie Gillard and Christy Keegan, Heroines and Tricksters.
Which one's which?
No.
Oh, I just...
And some of the heroines could be tricksters.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I don't have the blurb on it yet.
But both
Just-
Marnie and Christy qualify as
on
tricksters. I
both,
think.
Yeah.
I
both
vote.
categories. And it's time for us to say goodbye.
Well, we've lost another hour. Thanks to you. Thank you for listening.
We hope you listen again.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning